So, Eden Exchange, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming in today. I'm glad that you are up for Melbourne and we finally get to get you in the studio, because I know that Carly has been wanting me to get you in the studio for some time. So why don't we start by both of you introducing yourselves and a little bit of history of you, but we'll start with you, Raghu. Why don't you talk about your company, Eden Exchange, but also a little bit of your history as to where it came to start Eden Exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks a lot for this. So I'm Raghu. I'm the founder and CEO of Eden Exchange. Now, Eden Exchange is essentially trying to solve a very complex problem of creating a frictionless marketplace connecting business buyers and business sellers to allow for a transaction to occur. And we've been moving from a startup to a rapidly growing scale-up technology that allows for the facilitation of this. Now, our clients range anywhere from business brokers, private business sellers, franchises, accountants, M&As as well. We're also in the process of bringing together a fragmented ecosystem within that marketplace to allow for these transactions to occur. Now, how I got into this industry, look, I've run various businesses in the past. I've also worked in the corporate sector in investor relations, senior product manager, leading innovations team, all the way from companies like Computershare to Link Market Services to data companies. Unusually, I also ran a company called Eden Educational Services. That was a tuition company, very, very different sector, where we used to train essentially little kids for exams, like private schools and scholarship exams. I didn't teach one class, but we hired out schools, hired out teachers, ran multiple styles of educational campaigns. After some time, I was a younger guy. I wasn't hugely interested in education. I was more interested in the concept of business. And we decided to exit that business. During the time, I had a very difficult time trying to exit. So using a partner at that time, we made a range of websites, connection tools, and we managed to source a buyer through this process and a website and sold it to a client. Light bulb moment went off. There's a missing piece in this market to connect people like me, who were as a qualified seller, with a buyer, and to make this a very easy process of facilitation. From there, we grew our teams, we grew our technology, we grew our databases, to the point where we're generating thousands of inquiries a month. We're growing a marketing team, a technology team, a product team, as well as a whole sales-driven organisation as well.
Interesting.
That's why we came to you, Nudge, to help us with our recruitment.
Oh, I love that. I love the way you say my name. Frictionless is a good word. Frictionless is a great word. And I'm going to come back to that because I've sold a couple of businesses and it was anything but frictionless. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your story as well?
So for me, Steve, my background has been it's an eclectic background really, in terms of I've run businesses. I've come from a banking and finance background, very hardcore commercial and finance background, but the same entrepreneurial bent in me has always been very alive. I mean, at the age of 24, I was working at a bank, but at the same time, I owned a cafe as well, which is in the franchise experience. So it's funny, Raghu talks about the franchise element, but that's where I started to experience what it was to be a business owner and then look at what an exit looks like. But my background has been commercial, finance, strategy. I've worked in various roles from in the public domain and plus private enterprises. And my last role was a role where I worked with a family business where we helped scale it from a mid-size firm to about circa $200 million plus.
It's a big scale.
And it is. And I think the journey to scaling a business, growing a business, but really, how do you exit a business? And that's been an eye-opening experience throughout. And I think just before we got online, you were talking about it being anything but frictionless, but that is really where the friction is. And therein lies the opportunity as well.
Absolutely. And I guess before we get on to, I'm going to ask you questions relating to what happened to me twice. Well, it wasn't the same problem twice, by the way. I did learn from the first time. But in terms of, I guess, where you're at right now as a business, when did you start? What sort of size are you now? And where are you sort of heading as I'm assuming you're thinking about an exit as well. Where are you sort of heading in that respect? Why don't you give us that one again?
So we've been technically operating since 2015. So there's been years put into it. However, the actual move to a full-time business venture happened in 2016, 17. Okay. So like other people, I transitioned into this while working in other organizations, building the money, building the capital, bringing it all together to the point where we had a skeleton team, 4 or 5 people who were powering away, bringing on brokers, advisors, sellers to build this technology, to almost test this concept as quickly as possible to ensure we've got a marketplace to really scale into. So we grew that concept from 2016, 17 to 2019, 20, almost in a piecemeal, non-scalable fashion, to the point where we reached 2019, 20, where we had a solid marketplace, we had clients on board. Then our little friend called COVID came along and hit us. Now, during that situation, we did find that there was a panic attack with some of our clients.
Sure, there was.
We understood from that point of view how we needed to position ourselves not as a discretionary spend, but as a must-have part of a business set of operations as well. During that process, we took the opportunity to rejig the operation, start getting more investment into the company, start thinking about moving away from a family and friends investor base to a much more palatable scale-up set of investors. It was during this process also, we came to the conclusion that we really need to make a change in how we operate. We couldn't just go by the approach of just purely doing whatever the client tells us and building away a technology. We took a 3-pronged approach of being client-driven, product-driven, sales-driven as well. All of it was done about acquiring clients, acquiring knowledge, and acquiring a base. Now, that took us to the point where we could do a seed round last year that went quite well, to the next level where we were able to expand our team. We were able to get co-investment, also bring on or have a co-investor like the likes of Dhanush, who's an MD who can help us scale to the next level as well, to the point now where we're rapidly growing. We have a team of about 25 people. We have a brains trust located in Australia where we do mainly our marketing, sales, product management. Then we have a distributed team across the world in India, Philippines, Malta, and also a hybrid approach to building that team as well. So we're in rapid scale mode, but the people that are joining us now are really a mixture of technology, product, sales, and also strategy and marketing that are in our team.
Which is what we do, which is why we're here.
This is why we love you as well.
So talk me through the process, right? Let's say I'm a business owner and I've got a company, let's say a services business, because they're much harder to sell. So I've got a services business that I've been building, let's say 7 years. It's turning over, I don't know, let's say it's making a couple of $1 million a year, right? Which is often when people want to sell. That's sort of $2 to $4 million a year. And they of course want 30 million, which they're not going to get. But they're going, right, we want to sell this. We don't really know who our buyer is because we didn't think about that before. We just know we're getting a bit tired of it. We're not sure if we want to keep going anymore. But we want to exit it. We've probably got 3 years left in us, so we need to do that now so we can do our earn out. They come to you through whatever means, and we can come back to that. How does it work? What happens from there?
So, my first response would be, Steve, you've used a lot of terminologies that show how sophisticated you are in terms of understanding, in terms of understanding what it means to exit. But really, the small to medium business owners are not always familiar with these terminologies and are not necessarily aware of what does it mean to try and sell their business. The journey of a small to medium business is literally one where they work very hard in those businesses and build it up to a certain level. And generally that is their nest egg. And so for them, there's a lot of emotive element that goes into what it means to exit at that point. However, the options that they have to exit are typically very limited, or at least limited in the sense as in the information that they gather to try and understand what it means to look at what an exit is, understand what does it mean to get an earn out, what should my business be valued at. These elements are only driven to them by services that either they have to pay a lot of money for or access to information that typically is sitting in a lot of advisory based businesses or larger tiered organizations that cost a fortune to try and get access to that information. And typically they themselves may not have that information for that segment of the market. That's where we come in as an option.
Okay.
That we allow and present a marketplace for that seller to not only get acquainted with the process of selling, but also a platform that helps them get ready to sell, and then also builds them up with the collateral that they need to get ready to sell, but also from an informative perspective.
Yep.
Where, like you said, it's 2 million and they want to get 30 million for their exit. But no, what really is an exit for a business in a services-oriented industry like yourself?
Yep.
Today, that information is missing.
Yes.
And that's some of the problems that Eden Exchange is looking at solving from a business marketplace.
Cool.
It's one of the only places out there today where if you want to sell your business, you want to buy a house, there's a lot of options to go and get yourself information. If you want to know how to lend on it, there's a lot of information. However, when you're looking at buying and selling the business, where's that information?
There's none.
Right. It's very fragmented. And it means there's a lot of work that you've got to put into to get yourself aware. But what if we were to provide you a solution where we've brought together all the brains trust in that space, brought in technology to allow it to be efficient and seamless, and also allow you a lower cost option to look at exiting. And at the same time, ensuring every participant in the market enjoys. So we never call ourselves disruptors, because that typically for us is almost an ugly word, because why do you want to disrupt someone? If you're disrupting someone, you're almost taking someone's lunch. And I don't think that's really the way we want to operate. What we want to do is, can we add more to your plate? So if you're a broker and you're looking at doing more deals, we're a great destination to come.
Yeah.
If you're a seller that's looking at selling, we're a great destination to come. And if you're a buyer looking for an agnostic platform that will help you identify opportunities that you'd like to buy, we're a great place to come.
Yeah, and that's interesting because coming back to my first experience, I was pretty young. We actually got approached by a big listed organization, and being all starry-eyed, we decided to go ahead with it. But I had no clue, and thank you for saying I was sophisticated. I like it when people say things like that. I was very far from sophisticated there.
You have to be sophisticated.
Well, I was not, and I did not know what the whole experience was going to be like. And I went to a very expensive law firm and I paid an exorbitant amount of money and ended up in a contract that actually ended up with me losing a huge amount of money through it. It was a disastrous process. We won't go into it because this is a positive show, but it was a disastrous process. And there was nowhere to go, and and I was using a broker, and he was useless, and he didn't help me, and he didn't explain things to me, and my lawyers didn't understand, and you touched on that earlier, the sector that I was in, but I went to them because someone said, oh, we know X amount, and she's great, so I went and talked to her, and she, of course, took it on because she's a lawyer, so she thought that she could just go through the process, and there are nuances with different businesses, and I will come back to franchises, which you touched on earlier, which I know are incredibly interesting space, but how do you make that frictionless? Is it that you have people they can talk to, or do you have reams of information for them to access? How does that work?
That's a great question. Yeah. And your experience is atypical. It's not different to anybody out there. And that is the real pain point. Where do I get information that allows me to make an informed decision about either buying or selling? Yeah. So in terms of where we help and how we help that process and put this together, let me give you a quick example of a seller. If a seller wants to come on board, the key questions he asks himself is, A, what's my business valued at? Yeah. B, what is the process to sell? C, what's the cost to sell? And then eventually, what services do I need to try and sell? Mm-hmm. Now, how does our platform go about doing that? Our platform takes you through a seller journey that allows you to get onboarded and get ready for seller to be a seller. So you might have information you think is important, but our platform allows you to build information that's really more relevant to what a buyer looks for. That's one example. Yeah. The next example is, if you're wanting to sell your business, you want to ensure that you've got the right buyers coming to see you. You don't want to have, pardon the expression, tire kickers coming in and wasting your time, because you're spending most of your time really doing what? Running your business. Right. So now what happens is our platform goes through a process of vetting buyers. That's why we say the buyers we present are vetted buyers. What does that mean by vetting them? Not only do we validate their credentials, but we also ensure and validate there's a right fit for that buyer to your business. Yep. And that's how the platform comes on by enabling that buyer to facilitate an introduction to that seller, to say, I think this is the right fit, and a seller is able to pursue discussions based on that. Then, like you said, sometimes a broker experience may not be necessarily satisfactory. However, we are looking at helping that process to become more satisfactory.
Yep.
So sometimes, and one may not understand this, but a broker's bandwidth also to try and help that process can be a tough one, because at the end of the day, a broker gets paid based on a success fee, and they would only want to take businesses where they know there's a clear opportunity for success. So hence why sometimes there can be a mismatch as well as in the experience. But the platform now aims to tell a seller there is an appropriate time, maybe, if you want, to introduce a broker who's got experience in deal flow and taking you to a transaction. You might be an accomplished seller that could do it yourself. You have that option. But if you need a broker, we've got a plethora in our network that helps you do that. Because the key thing you talked about is, in my network, I knew a lawyer, and in my network, I knew someone that I could tap into. There are thousands of buyers out there and thousands of sellers that may not have such a strong network.
Absolutely.
That's why Eden Exchange comes there, to give you that network effect.
Yeah. Okay. And good question for you. In terms of the future, obviously this is buying and selling businesses. You yourselves have just been through a fundraise process, right? Similar sort of problems. Obviously we deal with enormous amount of startups from, I think we've worked with about 300 or 400 now, from two-person companies just starting out sort of up to a Series D. That process of raising money is as difficult and as hard and as useless in terms of information online that isn't completely confusing as buying and selling a business. Is that something you might consider for the future? Is it something that's in your thoughts for heads?
It's potentially the longer term play of what we're doing. Right now we're fairly focused. We're quite laser focused in terms of where our sandbox lies. Yeah. It's in that SME space, the mid-market and below. Primarily what brought this along was your experience is very common in terms of someone, I'm not sure how much your business is worth, but the expectation of the seller and the service level you are entitled to, someone who's got a $25,000 business to a $500,000 business, that level of service offering doesn't match what someone may be receiving if they're selling a $5 to $20 million business, where you have a large-scale M&A firm servicing all of your needs and also dealing with you as a dedicated client approach. So what we are attempting to do, and we're continuing to grow, not just through human level servicing, but by facilitating all of the requirements for a seller of any sort of level on the spectrum, where they can engage in an informed way, have access to all of the tools, access to the right people and the right network to get the deal done. Some of the mottos we're living by, we're not just saying we actually live by this as a company, is speed to close, meaning not just for the sale, speed to a decision, speed to a transaction. The transparency across our networks, like exactly what you said about not getting the transparency between the broker soloing the deal and the seller. We're trying to break that, completely break that, to have a transparent system. In our company, we do that as well. The next one is a simple motto. Is it good for the buyer, and is it good for the seller? It makes our decision-making extremely simple. Is it good for the broker, who is a seller, or the private seller? And during that journey, is the buyer benefiting from that? If we're able to service that, we also are profitable by that, and also move our goals along as well. The other one is, look, this isn't always the most popular one, but it is, look, if you want to make an omelette, you got to break a few eggs. That means we're not trying to break this industry, but we are trying to maneuver in a way that we're positioning all of these stakeholders in a way they have to act in a certain way. And in order to make them act in that way, they're actually facilitating more transactions in the industry as well. So a real world example, I just explained it in a different way, but it's the point you have just made about transparency really reverberates with us as well.
It's interesting. I think the industry needs, and there's a couple of other people we've had on the show in the not too distant past where they were taking investments that are, or have been up until now, exclusively reserved for people of a certain net worth or people with a certain network, and they're trying to bring those to the general public and democratize them. I guess to some degree, is that how you see this? You're trying to democratize that
We're
space?
Absolutely trying to democratize it. We're not in any way trying to be a crowdsourcing platform per se, but the work we are doing is democratizing that process to make it fairer for all parties in that transaction.
The element of democratization is more related to the presentation of information.
Yeah, access.
Really, access. Yeah. And, to talk about what you just raised about certain kind of deals are only the privileged few get access to, there's an element of truth to that too, because there's a rationale behind why certain deals are protected in a certain way because of certain sensitive information. And for example, if there's a big transaction, they don't want other people to know about it as it may impact not just the deal but the performance of the business. Yep. There may be various reasons. Now, that can apply to a smaller business as well. You can apply that to a small business who's trying to run his business, keep his staff happy. But if his staff begin to understand, my business is actually being sold, how motivated will the staff be if they found that out? Yep. So, information and how you share the deal and the transaction is an extremely sensitive element.
I've lived that. It's hard.
Right? Yeah. And so now the way we introduce technology and we're introducing this platform is around how do we start to validate a genuine party that is looking at buying the business. So this is where the vetting, the transparency, and showcasing the information is extremely critical. And right now, that's actually done in a very uncontrolled fashion. So really, people should be nervous today to say, when I want to buy and sell my business, how's my information being presented? Yeah. I have absolutely no control once it leaves my hands. Yeah. Our platform is actually telling you guys, we're trying to help bring that control back into the hands of where they really should belong, and allow you, who's grown the business to this point, to also be the driver around how it should exit. That's the democratization process of giving the people the power, if you might
absolutely.
say.
And to add to that, look, compared to many other industries, we've touched on it, this is the behind the eight ball. If you compare it to the traditional commercial residential real estate industry, this is one of the most fragmented industries in the Australian market. There are loads of brokers and websites and lead generation. While it's not like real estate where you have realestate.com and you have the brokers and the agents plugged into it. To answer your question, yes, we are in the midst of an investment round. Now, how we've been traveling, we've also found that the process we've been undertaking for this investor round still has, while it's been successful so far, it has still followed the motto of an old school style of round where we know this guy, we know this broker. Luckily, we're in the transaction industry, so it's been a lot easier for us. Yeah. But a centralized, systematic, democratized, transparent way to target the right stakeholder, we don't think it exists in that industry. Doesn't. Now, we're laying the foundation now to transform the buying and selling industry. That could be next step for us, but it's in a much longer term plan for us.
Okay. Let's go back to the smaller business owner. There's got two questions around this. So franchises, I want you to run me through franchises, whoever feels more ready to answer that question, because franchises are a law unto themselves in that, someone has gone and paid something rather than started something. They've taken someone else's model and hopefully they've grown that. And we've all heard the horror stories on the news about a variety of different franchisees being victimized and ripped off and controlled and all these kinds of things and forced to do things they don't want to do and all that kind of stuff. So I'm interested to hear your opinions on franchises, but just before we get onto that, because that's a whole separate subject, when you talk about the smaller business owners, and you touched on this earlier, how do you deal with and how do you help business owners who are running a family business? So it could be a restaurant, it could be something of that ilk, where their heart and soul has gone into this and they are selling for whatever reason. Could be health, could be they want to retire, or it's a reason like that. And they're very unsophisticated, and they obviously the value they put on it is enormous because it's their life, but it's not necessarily the value that someone who's buying it. How do you help them bridge that gap? Because that gap can often be significant, and it's an emotional thing. You can't just say to them, no, you're wrong, because it's not that simple, right? You can't tell someone who's poured every ounce of their life into something that they're just wrong. So how do you, because that I would imagine, that's tricky at a more sophisticated level where people just have the wrong impression. But when you go down to that level where it's real emotional, how do you deal with that as a tech business? I'm interested.
Fact and logic. Simple. Fact and logic. Yes, there is emotion behind what does a business need to sell. There's an expectation around what you'd like it to sell. But like every democracy that's underpinned by capital markets. It's what's the market ready to pay you.
Yep.
Now, what we're looking at doing from our platform by bringing in all these businesses into the one place where this information gets shared and gets digitized in a certain way, allows us now to share factual information. So if you were picking a particular suburb where your location is where your cafe is, and you're looking at certain demographics and dynamics that drive the valuation of the business, you will eventually get to a point in time where there are comparable sales and comparable data to allow you to validate the emotive sense of where you might get to.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to be a guarantee that you'll be happy with the price that it suggests and you'll be happy to take it. But at least what it's done is done one key fundamental point. It's made you more informed.
So you give them, like a real estate says, right, here are your recent sales. This is what you're going to get. You present them with that same information.
And this is the whole idea behind this. It actually gives the seller and the buyer options.
Yeah.
And great segue into the question that you asked around the franchise industry.
Yes.
If I may just touch upon the franchise industry. The franchise industry and the idea behind a franchise is in theory simple, where it's a de-risking exercise where if you don't know really how to run a business, a franchise system shows you a proven set of principles and business model that you can replicate for an area that you've chosen to make a successful enterprise out of. Having said that, theory versus what reality can happen is a complete different element. What this is aiming to do is allow you to go through a process that is transparent and allows you to deal with misinformation. Yeah. So for example, if you were dealing typically where information was being provided to you without the sense of your ability to do a due diligence, our platform helps you with that. So you're now able to be presented information in accordance with the franchising code of conduct. Okay. You're able to, with our partnership with the Franchise Council, we're now ensuring that we're really adhering to the principles of why a franchise works. And we are seeking to build a platform that helps a potential buyer that's looking at a particular franchise to come in a lot more informed than they would if they just pursued a venture in their own, with their own limited understanding. Yeah. That's really where our ability to help here is. And one element to this is our agnostic approach to this. Yeah. We're not necessarily inclined one way or the other. What we're seeking to build is an enablement opportunity for buyers and sellers to come in and share information, whereby that sharing and knowledge of information will lead to a better outcome because everyone is more informed. Yeah, so that's really what this is.
You're pulling back the curtain on the franchise industry.
The aim is to try, and I think we're talking about this ourselves, it's about shining the light. Yeah. That's really what we're seeking to do, shine the light. That's why one of our logos in Eden Exchange is a lighthouse, because we really see ourselves sitting at the shore and in the stormy seas helping to guide the buyers and sellers navigate through those treacherous waters.
I like that.
Yeah.
I do. It's good.
It's really good.
Pretty much what we're trying to do.
And to add to that, we are firmly embedded within the franchise industry. I mean, we work with more than 65 dedicated franchise partners who leverage of us to source new buyers. No, we're more
than 1,000 in Australia.
We're more than
really. Yeah.
So we're technically amongst the biggest providers in the country for that. Hence this exclusive arrangement we have with the Franchise Council of Australia. But franchising, look, often it does get a bad rap because only the bad stories will get shown on a car. It's like many industries. It's very similar to banking. Every 15 years, they'll find a way to mess it up in some way or another. Then it will come back in a much more refined fashion with better processes. It's going through that renewal process now, and we see it happening. So where we're placed is the agnostic approach we have towards franchising is understood, but we've seen extremely good success stories with franchisees coming on board through this matchmaking process we've had. Yeah. Even some who've bought multiple franchises have been tremendously successful. That's great. So if it's done correctly, if we have the ability to vet the franchise and represent the ones through our platform correctly, we can see it relating to a de-risked sales or business model for a buyer. Of course, if it's done wrong, it can ruin lives. Yeah. And we've seen that happen as well. So from our point of view, we now are in the ability to work with the people who match our criteria, who we can be transparent. Is it good for the buyer and the seller? Yeah. And also is there transparency across the board as well.
Okay, that's cool. Now, you touched on something then, you just said there's over 1,000 franchises. Who's the stats guy here? Who's got the stats on? I want to know how many.
Depends on what the stats
depends on the statistic.
Do you know because you've been going quite a while, right?
Yeah.
Do you know the amount of companies that have gone through transactions? Do you know the value? Do you have that kind of? Or I'm not expecting it to be exact, but who's got the rough idea? I'm just interested to know because, when you're talking about businesses, the numbers can be quite impressive, and we want to impress the audience. So, who's got the stats?
We'll get close to 4,500 buyer inquiries streaming through our systems every month, and seller inquiries as well.
Jeez, every month?
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
Now, our business has grown from, we would initially get clients sign up and just say, we want hundreds of leads, just give us emails, phone numbers. And we were finding we were just creating more work for these people versus getting that person who's likely to convert, who's signed off on disclosure documentation, who's gone to the point to a deposit, wants to interact with as well. So there's levels of interactions we provide. Now, in terms of the levels, the volume of deal flow that we have more than 4,500 businesses listed or across our organisation. We have more than 1,000 privately listed businesses that are distributed as well. Now, the transaction figure is the most difficult one because that changes every month, every day.
And would you know every transaction figure? I suppose you would have to for your own monetization. Right?
Yeah, and as we start to go through that process, in the last 12, 18 months, we've done more. We're closing out. In terms of deal flows, we're at least seeing ourselves close more. In this financial year, I'd say we've already closed in excess of 150 plus deals.
As in this financial year, as in
and the one
these 4 weeks
the one
that have
that's
happened?
sorry, the previous financial year. Sorry. Actually, the previous financial year. Yeah, we did well.
You're going to say that was the number. You shouldn't be here. You should be at work.
The idea is we hope to see ourselves getting to that level. But in all fairness, we've seen over 150. Is in when we say deals, there are many deals that are happening based on what we've showcased, but where we have controlled and helped the platform enable deals to occur is in the excess of about 150.
That's
for
awesome.
What we've done. In terms of showcasing of deals, they come to a few billion when you take into account what the valuation of each of those businesses are. Those are impressive numbers, but I think what's more impressive is how our team has actually grown, which is what I think is the real impressive part. And that is we have grown from a team of where we were about a year and a half ago to about 4 or 5 people to now we're bordering on 20, 22 and
massive
growing.
Growth in a very difficult market.
In a very difficult, short span of time. And actually our team is now very global, as Raghu probably highlighted previously, saying we've got a team in Melbourne. That's because we're Melbourne based. That's where the Brains Trust sits. But of course, the greater intelligence sits with resources in Brisbane. We've also got resources out in Malta. We've got resources out in India, and we've got resources out in the Philippines that currently work with us. So truly, why this is so important is because the ability to leverage off a global infrastructure is part of why technology, platform, and the ability to scale becomes a relevant element.
Absolutely. And is global for you as a business an option? Obviously, you're doing Australia. There's a lot of different legislation rules and things if you go overseas, but is that something?
Without a doubt, it's an option and in our long-term goals. Now, we're not silly enough to just say, let's start a bunch of offices around the world. It's a very methodical approach. We've almost mastered Australia, but we continue to do that. There's a natural fit. We already do New Zealand. There's a natural fit with Commonwealth countries with very similar transaction styles and platforms where the embracing of what we do is natural. Now, for us to make the jump into a completely global organisation, that's a bit further down our transaction path. So. But now in the next year and a half, 2 years, we'll be incrementally growing throughout that.
I think the answer to a global question is really, if we serve the current market well, then through the hidden champions methodology, we will be, if we are making our own clients champions of the story of what we do, naturally those champions will take us to markets we've never seen ourselves go to.
And that's what happened with us.
And you would have seen that happen with what you're doing. The example you gave us with Singapore and where this is going, it's probably the natural path that we do. If we do what we're doing really well today, then the world's your oyster.
No, look, we're now the US, UK, and Singapore and Philippines all because our clients went there, not because we were. And the same thing. And I'm assuming you already have international buyers coming to the site to want a device. So you've already got that link happening to some degree.
And to an extent, we've operated almost in ninja mode. We've become famous We've gathered data, we've serviced clients purely by presenting the client offering through to market and trying to service the buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
Now, this next phase and why we've been growing our go-to-market team, our product and marketing team, now will be out in a big way in the market.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we've been raising this money as well, to go with this sledgehammer approach where the Eden Exchange brand and the name is now permeating across digital, social, hence the reason we're doing these podcasts and things like that as well. Now, we're clearly never going to deviate from our proposition of serving that market, but now we're aggressively growing for a growth strategy.
And I mean, that's why we don't see ourselves necessarily, I mean, it's beautiful to be in startup mode in the sense as in culturally, because it just keeps you agile.
And it's easier.
And it's easier, right?
Because there's not as many people.
You cut through all the nonsense and get straight to the heart of the problem, which is actually what the DNA is, how we operate.
Yep.
But in reality, we're an absolute scale-up.
Yeah.
Which means we're no longer testing the proposition, validating it, etc. What we're now doing is scaling the proposition to demonstrate that this is actually something that the whole market's looking for. Now the pressure is on to show the scalability opportunity that it presents.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're doing.
And hence team, product. So we're really going down this track. What we were just talking about this earlier, like what's really good, like we get to wake up in the morning every day and feel we're doing a difference, our team are benefiting, we're growing this incredible organization as well, while we're having a major impact on the market. So it's a very good feeling that we do. We're trying to permeate that mentality across our organization. It's also a very much, we're never going to lose that fail fast rollout product market test. We're never going to do that. But us as the leaders of the organization, it's that gradual approach from, I don't need to be the best product manager, the best sales guy, the best accountant. We now are moving from, let's get the best product to let's build the best organization.
Okay. And what's been the hardest thing? What's been the hardest thing so far? That should probably go to you because you've been there since the very, very beginning before you had anyone else. So what's been the, I always ask this question because I think a lot of podcasts always celebrate how well everyone's doing, but they don't actually get down to and a lot of founders watch this show and they want to know, what was the hardest thing and how did you overcome it? It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a little thing. Sometimes it's just a mindset, but what was the hardest thing for you so far?
No, I think, look, as you know, business owners, there's hundreds of constant things pulling at you and the tensions and whatnot. But I think on one set, the first component way back when was getting the client. There's always this incremental points of inflection. One, you get your first release, you get your first point of revenue. You go from $10,000, take it to $100,000, you take it to $1 million. So the 10 to the 100 was a difficult point. Yeah. The 100 to $1 million, less difficult, but still difficult. Now the $1 million to 5 we're assuming is going to be a difficult pathway, but we're relatively broken in now in terms of how we operate. But difficulty in that point was, moving from that mindset of we have to do everything ourselves to moving to let's just bring on the best people and get them to do that as well.
I agree. I think team is the most difficult element.
Couldn't agree more.
How do you actually build a team? Yeah. And we have actually a saying within how we work, as in, for us, we actually don't want any superheroes working for us. Mm-hmm. We don't want superheroes. Superheroes are the guys who come in capes, save the day, take all the credit, and then expect to be gratified for that. Mm-hmm. For us, we're a team where we look at ourselves more as the Avengers or something, where you're telling ourselves this is not really a superhero effort, this is a team effort, and we want a team intelligence to come together to really solve this. Because if the problem is big enough to be solved by one guy, then the problem ain't that big.
Yeah.
But if the problem needs an entire team that continuously has to go and lose sleep over solving a problem, you're actually onto something.
I love the way you've articulated that. That's good.
And what's like the way we are in evolution is, you're not going to come with us and we're trying to replicate Google with a bunch of pizzas and quoting stuff from, Steve Jobs. And we would say we're,
no one from Google is watching this.
So we are now at the position where the maturity level of the trust, the brain's trust we've got is probably a step beyond it. Yeah. There have been people who have been there, done that, an eclectic background. they're able to take their experience plus all of this methodology we're talking about in scale-like methodology to really push the agenda. So we are a no-nonsense organisation, but we'll never lose that rampant positivity in what we're doing.
Okay.
In the business of buying and selling, you have to be a no-nonsense guy. At the end of the day, they want to sell it, so you've got to help them do it.
And you've also got to be able to cope with that. You said no nonsense, up and downs, left and rights. It's not unlike recruitment, and a lot of it's out of control, and it's to do with human behaviour, which is utterly unpredictable.
And a deal can fall out at the last second. It could be the perfect data, the perfect logic.
Yep.
I don't like that guy. So that can change the whole deal. So the ability to manage that emotion into a structured process, that's the next level of that platform development work.
Yeah. Okay, I've got 2 more questions. One is, I want to touch on the word Eden, because your previous business had it in it as well. I noticed when you mentioned that. So there's got to be some meaning
We
behind
love
that.
vagueness, all right? Like we love the E, essentially education went with Eden. However, the business owners back then, let's ensure there's a positive connotation that goes with growth. It represents something positive. People will think of hotel, the Garden of Eden, they'll think of growth, and it was alliterative with the word education. Okay. Now, that was the actual business that was the garden or the organic component that instigated this Eden education trend, Eden exchange system, which also happens to go with an E as well. So
the utopic state of the world. I love this. Can we take it to utopia?
And honestly, a product evolves. We didn't really know 100% what that marketplace was going to be when we started it 6 years ago. So it's an Eden. We're transacting on something positive quite here. But as it came to fruition, we realized it was just so different to any other name out there, like sell business, do this business. It always was a memorable name that people stuck.
Yeah. And people will say, I like not stupid names that are just made up words. I can't stand that. Yeah. And I'm dyslexic, so I have a real problem with that too, because I'm like, am I spelling it right or am I spelling it wrong? I've got no idea. It's not a real word. Yeah. But I like when you can shorten it. So people will just call you Eden, I'm sure. They don't always call you Eden Exchange. And I think that's nice.
Without a doubt. And it looked good on phones with apps and E, so we just continued pushing this on.
Yeah. Okay. All right, last question. Who wants to answer the question about why should someone come and work for you? There will be plenty of people that watch this show that would think, I want to work for that. I like that. Or that's the kind of role I want. Why would they want to come? You can both have a crack at this.
I think we can both have a crack.
I think you should both have a crack. Go for it.
Why would you want to come and work for us?
Yeah.
Well, if you're looking, or you always say that this is definitely not the place for the faint-hearted. So if you're looking for something that's going to make your socks go up and down every time you wake up in the morning and come across a challenge you don't think you've ever come across, and be happy. I mean, for us, the biggest analogy here, which I share with the guys, is constantly we're going to the summit and we're climbing Mount Everest. Now, who would you like to take with you on that climb? There are some guys who are going to help you with the oxygen. There are some guys who are going to help you with the planning. And there are some guys who are going to help you with many things to get to that summit. And it's about, would you like to be part of a journey that goes around climbing one of the highest summits you ever had to? The challenge of that is for you to recognize what part you play in climbing there. For us, we're clear. Anybody who wants to come with us is coming all the way to the summit with us. So if you're looking at being a person that wants to come all the way to the top and that's winning together, that's who we are all about.
Well, I like that. I mean, you are almost the Sherpa for all the business owners, are you not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We hope we get to that point, and that's right. So it's about taking a team along the journey, and it's about someone who would want to come with us recognizes that this is a journey, and I'm happy to come along the journey, and I want to be part of a team. I'm not a superhero, so I never wore a cape, and I'm here to come in and work with the whole group. And really, I want to have a crack at climbing that mountain. Yeah. And if that's you who wants to come and have a crack at climbing the mountain and really be part of a brain's trust, not really tapping into one brain, but building a collective intelligence, this is the place to be.
Cool.
I mean, you got to have to be consumed and you got to love the network. The concept of that network effect is what drives us. So we want that internal curiosity of understanding, how can we grow this network we're building? How can I fit into this team and help push it along? And how can our curiosity add to this equation where we've got our goal to hit to that summit? So you're going to come along to a rapidly growing company that will take your input, will expect a lot from you in terms of your level of input you're putting into it, but it's never the point where we'll never take an opinion and try to work that into a commercial outcome. So we really want those people that eternally growing, eternally curious, and love that concept of a network as well.
And anyone who works with us, we won't leave you behind.
Yeah.
You're coming with us all the way.
That's the Sherpa mentality,
so that's
right?
it. So we won't leave you behind.
Fantastic.
That's the idea.
Beautiful.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been fascinating. I love what you're doing. It was very, very much needed. There was absolutely no question. And you seem to be doing it at a much greater scale every year, which is the right way to go. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm sure that we will continue to talk to you. I know Carly loves working with you. And I hope that when you go to Sydney Airport tomorrow, there is a way of actually getting through security at some stage. And good luck with that.
Well, we've had no issues getting here, so no.
Oh yeah, but you got to go back. That's the hard part.
Coming back's going to be hard.
Coming back was brilliant. There was no crowd. It was like a seamless.
Okay, well, I pray for you that is the same tomorrow.
Yeah. And Steve, thank you so much for inviting us, and thanks for hosting us. It's
Pleasure.
been an
Appreciate
absolute
it.
pleasure as well. Thank you.
Thanks for instigating it. I really appreciate
It's
it.
great.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.